Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Waters Above, and it's been a minute since my last video here, but letting this market do its thing over the past month and listening to my intuition in the process, sticking to my investment thesis every step of the way, turned out to be the right move. Because when we look at the crypto market here in early June, we can now see that the last video I released had a warning for the altcoins that for the most part has actually played out. And yes, following my last video, we did in fact see a short-lived pump across the board for the altcoins. And yes, we even saw Bitcoin hit a new all-time high momentarily. But the specific warning I gave in that last video was to not expect an alt season just yet, and to actually expect the market maker to throw us a curveball before we had Bitcoin dominance completely break down, which initiates an alt season. What I actually said in the intro of my last video was that I believe the market maker has one more trick up their sleeve, and here we are as of yesterday on June 5th. Many of the top altcoin projects have actually traded lower than where they were trading during my last video, including XRP, which I covered at the end of that video I'm referencing called Alt Season is Coming Soon, but this happens first. And during that video, XRP was trading around $2.21, and yesterday XRP swiped down to $2.05 on the lows. I actually called this almost 2 weeks ago on May 26th, sharing this chart with our mastermind community, where I said XRP is likely to retest the zone between $2.05 and the more conservative level of $2.12. And I gave the exact date range of June 4th through 7th, and we perfectly swiped through that liquidity last night on June 5th. And for those who are following me over on X, you might have seen this post I shared on May 31st, where I mentioned the bottom on XRP should be in by June 4th through 6th. And of course, the most exciting part of this post is what I followed that up with, where I said after June 18th, expect a straight line breakout to $10 by late July into early August. And that's something we're going to cover in today's video to provide more clarity on what I'm expecting next for not only XRP, but for the entire altcoin market, especially now that we've seen many altcoins down 20 to 30% since the recent highs last month, and Bitcoin dominance is potentially moments away from pushing up even higher in the short term. This means specifically for the altcoin investors that we're not out of the woods just yet. And although I do believe this correction should be concluded within this month of June, we still need to keep in mind that we have some key dates ahead that could bring us significant volatility, as we're in extremes right now across the board. And it's up to us as conscious investors to stay neutral and focused right now more than ever, with how close we are to this final phase of this cycle. So with that being said, let's get into today's video and break down what I'm expecting next for these markets. So if you're new here at Waters Above, we're empowering you to unlock your infinite potential with esoteric investing by combining gematria, numerology, and astrology with technical analysis to understand these markets and become a more profitable investor. Now let's take the clear pill. And as promised, in today's video, I want to cover what I mentioned in this X post regarding XRP breaking out to $10 by late July into early August. But first, I want to quickly set the stage for this move I'm anticipating. And also, I want to let you know that I've actually personally invested in altcoins during this recent dip. Yesterday, I bought quite a few different altcoin projects. So if you want to receive live updates whenever I'm buying or selling my investments, and if you are interested in this What I'm Investing In podcast, where I reviewed over 20 different altcoin charts in this almost 2-hour long special packed with gems from start to finish, then you can join our community of like-minded conscious investors over at patreon.com/watersabove. And by joining our mastermind community, you'll also unlock access to all of those perks listed, and I'll have a new Red Pill podcast coming out this Sunday. So by joining that membership, you'll also get access to the new podcast I release every week, where I share a market recap, in-depth market decodes and technical analysis, and the setup for the week ahead, as well as reviewing 4 to 5 different altcoins that our community votes on. And I'm looking forward to you joining us over there at this really exciting time where we're all part of this wealth transfer. Now, let's set the stage for this upcoming breakout for XRP and the altcoins, starting with the Bitcoin chart. Since that's the energy that rules this market, and you can all see without a doubt that Bitcoin is still very dominant throughout this whole move we've had from this April crash into the new all-time highs that we set in late May just a couple weeks ago. And I'll be 100% vulnerable with you here and say that I was not expecting this straight line breakout for Bitcoin into new all-time highs without a typical correction that we normally see when I was making my last video. And when you look back to where Bitcoin was trading at in the last video that I released on April 24th, Bitcoin was around 93,500. And at that time, I was actually anticipating at least a retest of 89K, this green line over here. And instead, we left a notable CME gap behind at around 92K and pumped straight into new all-time highs just a couple weeks later, which of course was an incredibly unhealthy move. And the fact that we pumped into the Bitcoin Las Vegas conference, followed by this deeper correction after that event, proves that it was all just market manipulation to liquidate as many leverage traders as possible. And now that we're here, that's obviously the case. And I'm not saying that to defend any prior claims. It just is what it is. So I can admit that I was off on my short-term Bitcoin outlook with the retest below 90K. But of course, our main focus here when it comes to our investments is in the altcoins, since at this stage in the cycle, we're essentially just using Bitcoin as our market compass, along with Bitcoin dominance and USDT dominance. And when it comes to altcoins, many of them are actually trading lower than where they were when I filmed my last video, as mentioned earlier in the intro. So I did make a miscalculation on the short-term Bitcoin outlook, but I'm sure many of you remember earlier in videos going back to February where I mentioned that we were coming up on a very significant astrological event, this total lunar eclipse on March 14th, which starts our new lunar cycle. And I was very clear that I said, no matter what Bitcoin does in March and April regarding downside pressure, I am still expecting at least 100K Bitcoin by June. And I coupled that outlook with saying that I do not expect really exaggerated moves to the upside for the altcoins until July and August, leading into the next total lunar eclipse on September 7th. So that macro analysis was spot on, and the evidence is in the charts. It's undeniable. But all that really matters is how do we take action? Doesn't matter what we say or what we're doing with the charts. It's all about our actions. So now that we're back getting these lower levels for a lot of these altcoins, it's pretty much a second chance at what was going on during the crashing phase. And that is an absolute gift of an opportunity for us altcoin investors. So the fact that it played out this way leads to the next phase that sets the stage for what we're calling alt season. And to summarize how this phase we're currently in is likely to go, for those that did not watch my last video, I would need to draw attention to the way Bitcoin tends to trade during the months of July and June, which is very important since last year in May of 2024 was essentially a repeat of what happened this recent May here in 2025. So I'm going to quickly head over to the Bitcoin chart and just show you what I am talking about. I'm going to remove all this noise, and we only have one indicator here on the screen, and it is the moon cycles. The blue circles are your new moons, the white circles are your full moons. So the pattern we're about to review also happened not only last year, but it happened in 2023, 2022, 2021, and also in 2020, which could be especially significant since if you look at the stock market right now, this V-shaped recovery that we're getting is essentially identical to the C19 recovery after the C19 crash in March 2020. So I believe we should also be considering the patterns for the year of 2020 as well, moving forward here in 2025 with our current analysis. Now let's quickly review that pattern starting with last year. We're looking to May, and we have the white dot for May being the May full moon. And you could see that we actually pumped into this May full moon. Then we had a micro double top into the following new moon, this blue dot right here. And then we had a major correction that came in after that into the June full moon. And quickly, before we move on to the other examples, let's just check in with how Bitcoin traded into this recent full moon in May. So we have over here this white dot showing you that Bitcoin pumped into the recent May full moon. And then we had another higher high actually marking our local top around this recent new moon. And then since that new moon, we've had one of our largest pullbacks since our recovery. Actually, it is our largest pullback, and that's shown up very noticeably in the altcoins. But we have a little bit of a pattern here where we're actually bullish around the full moon, typical new moon top, and then a correction immediately following the new moon. So for those that are perhaps newer here, it's actually very typical that we are down around a full moon and we are up around a new moon. And typically Bitcoin bottoms around a full moon and then it rises from a full moon into a new moon. And then we have our corrections from topping on the new moon down into the full moon. So it's actually not as common seeing a pump into a full moon as it would be a correction into a full moon. And that's what's so fascinating about the month of May, because we see this pattern of us pumping into the May full moon, a correction after the following new moon, and then we actually bottom, or we have very bearish price action around the full moon of June. And I think that's why today's video is so important, because we're heading into the full moon of June next week. So this is perfectly timed. All right. So now let's move on. We're going to keep in mind what happened in the month of May, June into June full moon of 2024. Let's move on to the year prior. And we're at 2023. And you can see we have the May full moon right here. We were pumped, topping. We were actually not that much lower on the following new moon regarding the overall structure. But then what we did see following this new moon was a low and an even lower low into the June full moon. And that's what we're looking for right now. Also, one thing to note, this was during the Bitcoin conference. I believe it was Bitcoin Miami. So we had the Bitcoin conference, this false move up, and then we went even lower after it, which we've done in every single Bitcoin conference, by the way. So what we're seeing right now is not weird by any means. But I just want you to keep that in mind, the fact that we did correct into the June full moon and we went lower than where we were trading around the May full moon, right? It was a downtrend in the micro. Now, let's move on to 2020. This was more like bear market vibes, but it still proves a point where we are up around the May full moon, kind of like a micro double top around the following new moon. And then from the May new moon, a huge correction into the June full moon. Then we have 2021, which was very important specifically for my analysis here over at Waters Above, because this right here, this big correction that we had after this crown distribution top, was the start of a lunar cycle. And I feel that there was a lot of similarities between this correction and the one that we just got into April. Also, this recovery that we're getting right now is very similar to the one that we got into September of 2021, but I'll touch on that at another time. The point that I'm making here is month by month, we have being up around the full moon of May, followed by a micro double top into the following new moon, and then a correction that follows that into the June full moon. So we're not making this up. We're not just pulling this out of nowhere. This is 4 years in a row at this point. Then we have 2020. And this is very fascinating, again, because we had the C19 crash, and then we have this right here was the full moon in May. So we did what we typically do for the May full moon. We pumped up, have our micro double top on the following new moon, and then an immediate correction to follow. But this is what's kind of different, is that we did not actually see Bitcoin push any lower really into the June full moon. We held sideways and had this kind of boring, arduous, low volume, sideways trading range with barely any movement for quite some time before a move up into late July and August. This is in alignment with the current analysis that I feel will be happening for this year, that will have an overall bullish July into August as I started today's video. So this is What we're seeing right here is actually the reason why I bought yesterday's dip so aggressively, because the lows that we just got for Bitcoin at 100K might be it. We might not actually see much lower prices. And judging by today's buyback, which is not convincing to me because it's just a recoil effect from the exoteric news between Trump and Elon Musk and that drama that they're having. And we're not even going to focus on that here on this channel. That's irrelevant to me. All that matters was we had a cyclical pattern playing out, and it played out. And I went over this in my last Red Pill podcast, where if you take from the new moon on XRP plus 9 days, it's pretty much every bottom. And that's how I was able to determine what I shared over here. And it was spot on. So there's something to this, using the moon cycles to determine pivots of energy, really significant buying points, and then also areas of interest to de-risk or to take profits. But this example right here, with the way that the stock market has been recovering in a nearly identical fashion, and the fact that Bitcoin has also hit a new all-time high into the month of May, where we were pretty much fully recovered from the C19 crash into the month of May, it made me want to take action into yesterday's correction, because we might now just hold sideways for a little bit until we get through this FOMC meeting on June 18th and pushing into the month of July overall. And we know that the crypto market could do crazy things in just a single month, as we saw last year from October to November. Pretty much in 40 days, we saw every single altcoin go up 300 to 400%. And it's happened pretty much for the third time this cycle without a true alt season. So I think that's very important to point out as well. Just for those that don't believe that there's much more to go in this cycle, I actually am one of the people in the camp of saying that we're still early. It's a big opportunity for us. So I bought the dip yesterday because of what I'm seeing here in this pattern, the post new moon correction. It was good enough for me. And also, now with that being said, there's a pattern for June 14th into 15th. You're seeing this little wick to the downside right there. That's something to consider. And I'll actually be covering that more in depth in the upcoming Red Pill podcast this Sunday over on Patreon. But just so you're all aware, you need to keep in mind that the main player in this gambling casino right now is Donald Trump. And his birthday is June 14th, which lands on a Saturday. And this is important because Bitcoin tends to pivot around the time frame of the full moon, and I just told you that the upcoming full moon will be on the June 11th time frame. So that's just a couple days shy of Donald Trump's birthday. So we always look at a window plus or minus 5 days around a particular lunar phase to determine a pivot in energy. This tells me that we still have a little bit of time to go, and we could have perhaps some short-term downside leading into Donald Trump's birthday. Pretty much more around the full moon. And then, of course, we have the next FOMC meeting where Fed Chair Powell will spellcast the markets. And this is a very typical time frame to see insane market volatility. So I believe you all here already know about these things, and I don't want to waste your time with that. For those that are saying, oh, there's no way that Donald Trump could matter in the esoteric code of all of this stuff, and why does it matter what he, let me show you really quickly. We have Liberation Day was on 4/2, right? April 2nd. Then we had the absolute lows of the market were on April 7th. Let me just quickly show you a Bitcoin. We have right there the low, April 7th, which, by the way, Bitcoin hit 74K on this exact day. The mirror of 47, 74. The 47th president of the United States is Donald Trump, all right? Then we have 47 days later, into May 23rd, Bitcoin stops the rally. We literally went up 47 days after the 4/7 date at 74K Bitcoin, hit a new all-time high, and then since have corrected. You cannot make these numbers up. So this is all coming back to Donald Trump. Believe it or not, that's how this has been working since the start of this year. Perhaps many of you remember his Truth Social post on March 2nd into March 3rd. We had this big pump and dump in the markets. Yesterday, we had the opposite effect with the stuff between him and Elon. A dump and pump right back to the same targets. When was Bitcoin's initial all-time high of the year before the crash? Donald Trump's inauguration. Again, you can't make this stuff up. Where did we pivot? absolute lows leading into this major spike up, Donald Trump winning the election. Everything he's doing, saying, posting, or reacting to, it doesn't matter. It's all coming back to him. So he's the main player in this gambling casino, and I think you need to utilize the number 47 and 74 as part of your code moving forward. So for me, I think if we take these same numbers and apply them into the future, this brings us to around July 8th. That would make a lot of sense for us to have a much higher price for Bitcoin. I believe we'll be bottomed before then. But keep this in mind. This is very powerful code, and I'll continue to share more thoughts as we go. But getting to the point of today's video, it's returning back to this post that I made, which was talking about XRP after June 18th to expect a straight line breakout to $10 by late July into early August. And here we are, completing the week of heavy manipulation into today, June 6th, where in several cases this could very well be our lows, specifically for XRP, just like I mentioned moments ago, where we tagged down on this 206 level. This was actually a target that I was anticipating into this exact time frame, so this move has been complete. And like I just mentioned moments ago, we still have a very clear pattern for Bitcoin experiencing downside pressure, specifically into the full moon of June, which you all know is June 11th. So we can't disregard that for our short-term thesis. So now that we're here and we've set the stage for this upcoming move on XRP, let's get into the XRP chart, starting with where we were during my last video. And just quickly recapping, we were around $2.21. And we actually had this green fractal over here pushing us into around 260, getting rejected on one of these lines that I have on the charts. I've been really enjoying using trend lines in this fashion lately, kind of like a comb. And I've been getting a lot of accuracy with any pushes to the downside or pushes up. All the resistance levels, whether we're in a rising pattern or a falling pattern, I've just been really enjoying doing my trend lines like this lately, creating kind of like a comb or a fan. But anyways, with that being said, we actually had this move up to around 264, 265 into the May new moon. And then we've gotten our pullback since. And what I was telling you before about these 9 days after the new moon, that was exactly what we did yesterday. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see. So we have the new moon. We have 9 days after is our low. We have this new moon over here. We have 9 days after is our low. We have this new moon over here. We have 10 days or 9 days after, actually, you see that huge wick to the downside? That was our low. We have over here, we have 10 days after, that was our low, pivot on the 11th day. We have over here, we have literally 10 days or 9 days after, pivot low, pushed up. So we could even swing trade this. I mean, it's amazing. So yeah, we did the pattern yet again. All year we've been doing that. So this is really fascinating how we've been following this green fractal. And by the way, this fractal was pulled from this time frame over here in 2017, which by the way was in the month of May when we topped out, and kind of the rest is all history. You know, this would have been a really amazing time to be invested in XRP because it was its biggest move in history. Now here we are, and we're actually pushing up and have been trading near this blow off top high from 2018 for over like 180 days now. I mean, I think we're probably into the 180 day. Yep, exactly. 190 days. This is quite a while to see XRP consistently closing daily candles at $2. That's very powerful, guys. So what that means from a technical perspective is that if we're holding this level for the same amount of time, let me just look and see about how long it took. Here we are at about 217, 218 days. And by the way, how did I determine the breakout that we would get in XRP here? It was by counting the amount of days of all of these phases over here. We did that before. There was a really famous chart that I released. It was very viral for the XRP community. I'll recap that at a later time. But for now, I do think that we're in this fractal right here, and we're setting up for the next straight line breakout like that. And we're very much here, I think, about here or so, or I mean, I don't think we're this close, but I think we're getting very close to the final stretch of this move before it just shoots out, because you can't spend too much time in a pattern holding it without release. So there's a lot of money that's about to flood from Bitcoin into the altcoins, and XRP will reap the benefits just of a basic correction or not necessarily correction, but a move down in Bitcoin dominance, we'll call it. So just a reduction in Bitcoin's dominance here in this crypto conversation. So getting back to this XRP chart, it's actually looking very good and completely on track for these moves that we were getting move by move, all the pivot highs and the pivot lows back from the 2017 fractal. So it's been working perfectly in my opinion. And of course, this isn't to determine the exact prices, but rather to be able to determine the downside pressure or upside momentum into specific timeframes leading into this breakout phase here, which interestingly enough, you can see this fractal actually moves up from here into around late June. Let's call it June 21st, June 22nd. And that's right around our new moon. And then we correct after the new moon momentarily, just a little bit. And then it's straight line rocket ship to the upside. Now, before we talk about the $10 XRP target in less than 10 weeks from now, I just want to take a moment to ask if you all noticed something when I was covering the Bitcoin moon phases for May and June. Perhaps you noticed something about the month of July. So if so, pause the video and leave a comment below. It'll be interesting to see who noticed the pattern, because some of you might think I skipped over it, but that was actually very intentional. But for time's sake, yes, in many cases, the end of June trading into early July has been known to have corrections, but they're typically short-lived, and the month of July finishes off very strong overall, and that's exactly what I'm anticipating for this year as well. So if we were to disregard next week and just skip ahead to the upcoming new moon, we can definitely see XRP around $2.40, maybe even $2.50 into June 25th, but then we sell back off into similar levels that we're trading at right now. And then we'll probably get like a 4th of July ritual this year, which I'll cover in a later video. And then we'll move up in a straight line for a majority of the month of July. And when I zoom out, you can actually see that this fractal, it hits almost $20 by the end of July. You could see right there around July 28th. Now, it's not going to be perfect with the timing, but I do feel the bullish energy should be kicking in at the same time frame. And I told you a $10 XRP. I'm saving higher targets for future videos because we need to see how this breakout phase goes, and we need to see where Bitcoin dominance is at. We need to see where USDT dominance is at. We also need to see where Bitcoin's trading. If Bitcoin is trading into 130K, without a doubt, I see a $10 XRP happening at this exact same time. So we'll let this unfold as it needs to unfold is what I'm trying to say. But it is pretty incredible that we're seeing as high as $18, $19, $20 by the end of July. And my analysis was a straight line breakout to 10 by late July into early August. Now, we won't get too far ahead of ourselves because we still have a very symbolic event ahead, which is Donald Trump's 79th birthday. And for those decoders in our community, you know the number 79 represents gold because the 79th element in the periodic table is gold. And we know how much Trump absolutely loves using the term gold, calling this a new golden age. He came out with the gold Visa card, similar to the green card for the USA. And we have gold hitting new all-time highs as he became president again. Non-consecutive terms, really interesting, perhaps connections to Grover Cleveland. Again, decoders would really love this stuff, but even the White House's X account, their bio says the golden age of America begins right now. Well, Donald Trump's about to turn 79 tied to gold and being essentially equidistant from the upcoming full moon on June 11th, the fact that his birthday is the 14th, and equidistant to the upcoming Fed meeting, the FOMC, on June 18th. It smells of market manipulation, and you could all expect them to put on a good show for us. That's what they do best. Just look at what we watched happen over the past 24 hours with the Elon and Trump soap opera. Gotta love the distractions. So to summarize today's video, we have clear manipulation happening in the short term and a clear pattern for the week ahead, and any and all dips are buying opportunities. Not financial advice, of course. This is just how I'd personally be treating this current pullback in the altcoins. So in the event that you're not exposed to this market at all, or if you'd like to balance out some of your positions, then consider DCAing into position sooner than later, because this upcoming full moon next week, we might be pretty much bottomed for many of the altcoins, and the rest are likely to be bottomed by latest the first week of July. And please know that just because I'm saying the term bottomed does not mean that we will see lower prices than what we got yesterday on June 5th. What I'm referring to as bottoming is the actual pivot in energy from noticeable bearish price action back to bullish. So kind of like what we saw in October and November of last year, where we got a 300 to 400% move for most of the altcoins in a little over a month. You can see XRP almost went up 500% during that time frame. That's what I see going down before the upcoming total lunar eclipse on September 7th. So consider where XRP is trading at right now as we record this video. We're actually only about 350% away from the $10 level. And we actually are pretty close. If we were to mimic this fractal over here, we would be coming close to the top of this fractal that it's laid over from 2017. So that makes $10 possible, even with the slightest breakdown in Bitcoin dominance, which I do suspect will occur during the month of July. So there it is, family. Let's see what the market brings us next week. Expect it to be very volatile as the traditional markets are nearing a full recovery from the tariff crash, which is very similar to the C19 crash and recovery back in 2020, which, by the way, we saw the indices top out into the June full moon back in 2020 before a short-term correction that was actually quickly bought back up, and we were heading even higher into July. So keep that in mind, especially since I mentioned that any corrections at this time are really solid opportunities to gain exposure to this crypto market before a true alt season. And if you want to learn more about investing and my personal strategies as a profitable investor, then you could check out the Crypto Mastermind over at watersabove.com, which actually includes my entire exit strategy blueprint completely for free within that course. And you could actually take 10% off your order today by using the promo code REDPILL at checkout. Or if you want an even bigger discount, you could unlock 20% off any of my courses by becoming a Patreon supporter of our mastermind community membership at patreon.com/watersabove. And you could find that link in the description or in the pinned comment below. And I'm looking forward to catching you all in the next update. I'm wishing you all an amazing rest of your day in the Matrix. Much love.